So, no Jesus, no hope. That's N-O Jesus equals N-O hope. Or otherwise you could put zero Jesus, zero hope. But then you could also say no Jesus, no hope. And you might say, well, Mark, you're saying the same thing. But I'm saying no Jesus, K-N-O-W. And no hope, K-N-O-W, hope. So, whilst they're both no, one is actually knowing Jesus brings hope. And the other one, not knowing Jesus, is no hope. So today is a day of hope, a day of faith, a day of love. Today we gather to share in the Word of God, to grow in His wisdom and to feel His divine presence. We're here to learn, to understand and to apply His teaching in our lives. That's why we come to church. To do all that, to learn, to understand and to apply His teaching in our lives. Now, there was a theologian. His name is G.K. Chesterton. Now, you may have... Who's heard of him before? Okay. Do you know that he's associated with the... is it Father Brown?
Yep.
Mysteries?
Yep.
So I wouldn't have thought... I didn't know that until this week. But Father Brown Mysteries were written by G.K. Chesterton. Well, he once said, hope is the power of being cheerful in circumstances that we know to be desperate. That's a hard thing, isn't it? Hope is the power of being cheerful in circumstances that we know to be desperate. And this quote rings true in our lives, doesn't it? We all face storms. We all have moments when we feel as though we are losing our stride. But in these moments, it's in those moments that we must remember the hope that Jesus brings. No Jesus, K-N-O-W, no hope, K-N-O-W, hope. So, storms are stalling your stride, are they? You know, life is like a voyage on a sea. We all have our boats, our tools and our destinations, and as we sail, we encounter storms. These storms, well, they represent the challenges, the trials, the tribulations that we face in our lives. They come in different forms. It could be sickness, it could be loss, it could be financial failure, it could be betrayal. And I could go on and on and on as to those storms. They're fierce and they're daunting, and they can stall our stride. In the face of these storms, we often feel helpless and overwhelmed. We feel like the man from the Gerasenes, possessed by demons, living in tombs and breaking chains. We feel like we're losing control, like we're being driven into solitary places. We feel like our lives are being drowned just like the herd of pigs. But it's important to remember that these storms don't define us. Don't let them define you. They don't determine our work or our destiny. They are merely obstacles. They're tests of our faith and our resilience. And just like any test, they can be overcome. In the midst of these storms, it's easy to lose sight of our destination. We get so caught up in the winds and the waves that we forget where we're going. We forget our purpose, we forget our mission, we forget our calling. We forget that we are children of God, created in His image and likeness, destined for greatness. Who doesn't know that we were created in His image and likeness? Because that is straight up the front in the book of Genesis. God hasn't forgotten us. He sees us in our storms, He hears our cries, and He comes to our rescue just like Jesus did for the man from the Gerasenes. He didn't ignore or abandon him. He didn't judge him or condemn him. He saw him, He heard him, and He delivered him. And that's the hope that we have in Jesus. That's the faith that we must hold on to. This is the love that we experience. No matter how fierce our storms may be, no matter how daunting our challenges may be, no matter how overwhelming our trials may be, Jesus is there. He is our refuge and our strength and our deliverer. So as we face our storms, let's remember the man from the Gerasenes. Let's remember his desperation, his deliverance and his transformation. Let's remember that Jesus didn't just calm his storm, he also restored his life. He didn't just deliver him from the demons, he also gave him a new identity, a new purpose and a new mission. And let's also remember that Jesus can do the same for us. We sang that in that chorus, didn't we? Jesus can do the same for us. He can calm our storms, he can restore our lives, he can deliver us from our demons, he can give us a new identity, a new purpose, a new mission. All we need to do is to trust and surrender to him and to follow him. So as we look at this reading, this Gospel of Luke chapter 8, it's on your newsletter, we find there is Jesus stepping ashore into the region of the Gerasenes. It's up the top of the Sea of Galilee, over to the right a little bit, or just trying to get my to the east a little bit, around the northeast area. Here he was met by a man possessed by demons. A man who had been living among the tombs fell at Jesus' feet, crying out in fear and desperation. Yet Jesus, in his infinite power, mercy, commands the impure spirits to leave the man. And so this is the first aspect of our reflection. Jesus' divine authority and his ability to justify the unjustifiable. We see the transformative power of Jesus. The man who was once tormented by demons is now free. He's no longer a prisoner of his own mind, but a man restored. This isn't just a simple act of healing, it's a complete transformation. The man's identity, once defined by his possession, is now defined by his liberation. He is no longer the demon-possessed man, but a man who has been justified by Jesus. And Jesus' act of justification is not limited to the man's physical state. It extends to his social and spiritual state as well. The man who was once ostracised and feared by his community is now accepted and welcome. He's no longer an outcast, but a member of the community. And his spiritual state, once dominated by demons, is now filled with the presence of God. He's no longer a vessel of evil, but a vessel of God's grace. The wonderful thing in these situations are that the possession, his spiritual state, which was filled with demons, he didn't leave empty. It was filled immediately with the presence of God. Because if you fill it immediately with the presence of God, there's no room for them to come back. But if you are delivered, but you don't replace it with the Spirit of God, it's an empty house waiting to be reoccupied. So as we move in the story, we see the man begging to go with Jesus. But Jesus, in his wisdom, sends the man away with a mission. Return home and tell how much God has done for you. And so that's the second part of the reflection. Jesus commissioned the man as a witness to his power and his mercy. This man who was once a prisoner in his own mind is now a messenger of God's grace. He's not simply a recipient of Jesus' mercy, but he's a conduit through which that mercy is shared with others. His story, once marked by torment and isolation, is now a testament to God's transformative power. He's not merely a man who's been healed, he's a man who's been called to share his healing with others. And finally, we see the response of the people in the region of the Gerasenes. They're seized with fear and ask Jesus to leave. And that's the third aspect of the reflection. The reaction of the community to the transformative power of Jesus. So the people of the Gerasenes, like the man, are confronted with the power of Jesus. But unlike the man, they respond with fear rather than faith. They see the transformative power of Jesus, but they don't understand it. They witness a miracle, but they don't embrace it. And instead, they ask Jesus to leave. And they choose to remain in their comfort zone rather than embracing the transformative power of Jesus. And that happens today. People still choose to stay where they are, even though they've seen transformation in other people and heard testimony of other people. They choose to remain in their comfort zone rather than embracing the transformative power of Jesus. That should change. So let's turn our attention to the final point in our sermon today. The madman made messenger. This is where we see the culmination of the story. It's where we see the power of God's love and grace in action, transforming a man who was once possessed by demons into the messenger of God's good news. And the first thing we need to understand is that about this man is that he was not just any madman. He was a man who had been tormented by a legion of demons, a man who had been living among the tombs, cut off from society. He was a man who was considered beyond help. N-O, Jesus, N-O, hope. But when Jesus came into his life, everything changed. This is the power of God's love in action. It's not just about making bad people good. It's about making dead people alive. It's about taking those who are lost and bringing them home. It's about taking those who are broken and making them whole. This is the power of God's love, and it's power that's available to each and every one of us. Remember that. It's a power that's available to each and every one of us. Now let's consider the transformation that took place. After his encounter with Jesus, he was no longer a madman, but a messenger. He was no longer possessed by demons, but filled with the Spirit of God. He was no longer living among the tombs, but living among the people, sharing the good news of what Jesus had done. There's another great Christian writer, C.S. Lewis. Now, I've quoted him a few times. And C.S. Lewis says, God doesn't want something from us. He simply wants us. Quite often we think he wants something from us. He wants us. We just have to give ourselves. But we get caught up and we need to give him this and we need to give him that and we need to give him... He just wants you. Because he loves you. He just wants us. And that's the message that the man was sharing with the others. He was telling them that God loved them, that God wanted them, that God was willing to do whatever it took to bring them home. And this was before his son died. This is the message that we're called to share with the world. And let's consider the impact of this man's transformation and of those around him. The people who had known him as a madman were now seeing him as a messenger. They were seeing the power of God's love in action. And it was changing their lives as well. They were seeing that there was hope for them. Remember? K-N-O-W, hope? No, Jesus, no hope. So they were seeing the power of God's love in action, and it was changing their lives as well. They were seeing that there was hope for them, that they too could be transformed by the love of God. And finally, let's consider the responsibility this man now had as a messenger. He was no longer just the recipient of God's love. He was now a conduit of God's love. He was now called to share the good news of what Jesus had done for him. To tell others about the hope and transformation that was available to them through the love of God. And as we come to the end of our time together, let's remember that the hope that we found in the story of the Gerasene demonic, this man who was once tormented and isolated, was transformed by the power and love of Jesus. His chains were broken, his spirit was healed, and he was given a new purpose, to share the goodness of God with others. Isn't that just like our God? He takes our brokenness and he takes our pain and our struggles and he turns them into something beautiful. He gives us hope in the midst of our storms. He brings us peace in the midst of our chaos. And he uses our stories just like he used the story of the Gerasene demonic to demonstrate his power and love to the world. The Gerasene demonic took the opportunity to the world of the moment. He took that opportunity of a moment, a chance moment, a moment that transformed his life together. He's seen Jesus get off the boat. It was a moment. And let's not miss those moments that come our way. Let's be looking out for those God moments and respond. Let's not miss out on them and the life-changing blessings they bring. We're going to sing a song. This is God.